Hello and welcome to the Main Cave. Now in today's video I'm going to be going through my newly purchased iPhone 14 Pro and I'm going to be comparing it to my last phone, the standard size iPhone 12. If like me you upgrade every few years or so, you may be due a new phone, and seeing how well last year's iPhone 13 Pro performed over the standard 13, I wanted to see what those extra features were all about that will make the 14 Pro stand above the regular 14. So in this video, I won't really be touching upon iOS 16 software features unless it directly impacts the differences between the hardware of the 12 and the 14 Pro. So I bought this one direct from Apple. It's the 256GB model and it's costing me just over £50 a month with no SIM over 2 years. And depending on where you are in the world, the iPhone 14 Pro is either quite achievable or it's downright impossible, but I'll have more information on that at the end of the video. The reason I got the 256GB model is for the reasons I will explain later, but it does have a feature that the lower 128GB 14 Pro doesn't. And I went for the deep purple as well. It's just a bit different to being black and white, and in the flesh it's stunning and is a lot darker than I was expecting from seeing it at the keynote. To start off with, there is a ton of small differences between the 12 and the 14 Pro, but in this video I'll be going through the main ones which you will notice day to day using the phone, the headline features, ones that actually make a difference. So things like crash detection and the satellite emergency positioning I won't be testing in today's video. And first up, in no particular order, it's probably the biggest headline feature. It's the dynamic island. This feature I thought would have been just a little bit of fun, but it's way more than that. So let's face it, it's a genius way of having a notch but adding functionality. I personally was never that bothered about the notch on the 12 and I could take it or leave it, but this notch is so much better. When a supported app is in the island, you have a few ways to interact with it. Firstly, you can simply tap it and it brings up that app. We'll use Apple Music in this example here. I have music playing and I've pinged it up into the island. One tap and it brings it back to the music app. No more swiping at the app or swiping down on the screen. In reality, it saves seconds, but in terms of flow, it makes the whole experience so much more intuitive and it feels much snappier. Again, music is in the island. What you want to do is you can now hold it down on the island and it brings up quick access features. So for music, that is the scrub up and down the track, forward, backwards, play, pause, and other AirPlay controls. Also notice in the island that the waveform to the right for the music app actually fits to the time of the music. It's not just a stock image or video. Not only that, if you add a second compatible app such as a timer, it beautifully adds the most appropriate app in the separate bubble next to the island in a sort of dynamic islet. This again can be tapped or pressed for the same controls as if it were in the main island. The only problem I found so far is that some of the third-party apps haven't been quite accommodated yet, but no doubt it won't be long before they get updated. Next up is the battery. Now, as a disclaimer, I can't directly compare my iPhone 12 with my 14 Pro, simply because my 12 is having a 2-year-old battery inside and it's currently sat at 88% battery level, which means it's not great. But from new, the 12 had a 2,815 mAh battery and this iPhone 14 Pro has a 3,200 mAh battery, which is roughly a 12% increase. Apple claim a bump of 6 hours video playback, 10 hours audio and 9 hours YouTube, and after a few days with the phone, although I'm not 100%, I'm pretty sure it's close to that. So I won't be disagreeing with those figures. If you do go for the Max Pro over the Pro, then you can expect an even bigger jump in times. The only time my battery really took a substantial hit was when the extra brightness, which I'll talk about later. And with my 12, I currently get to about 2 PM, 3 PM before it needs a charge. With the 14 Pro, I was sat at just under 70% at 2 PM. Again, due to the extended battery and probably the 12's drain. Third up is the physicals. When seeing the spec, I wasn't imagining this to be much of a noticeable difference, but there is. The 14 Pro has a shiny metal outer edge and the rear is a matte feeling metal casing. This is a stark difference to the 12, which is a lot smoother and a lot more of a fingerprint magnet on the glass rear. One thing that did take me a day or two to learn is the placements of the power button and volume buttons. These have been moved down slightly and only by a few millimeters, but it did take a couple of days of years of muscle memory to be able to press it every time correctly. The size is almost identical in width, but weight there is a very noticeable difference. The 12 is 162 grams or 5.73 203 ounces, but the 14 Pro is a whopping 206 grams or 7.27 ounces, an increase of over 25%, which is a lot, and you will feel it. It is still beautifully balanced, but something to be aware of is that you're probably deciding on the Pro Max, as that's another 50% heavier than the 12 at 240 grams or 8.47 ounces. Next one is a small one, and it's the placement of the phone call speaker. And I didn't realise how much of a difference it makes, as it's the same in the 14. It goes from a large cutout, which gathers dirt and dust, to an almost invisible slit around the outer casing. Aesthetically pleasing, doesn't affect the sound aiming out of it, it just adds to the look of the phone over the 12. And also, if you haven't noticed already, the camera module is huge, and I mean huge, not only in diameter but in depth, which leads me nicely onto number 4, which is the camera. So this is another big change and a lot to get through. At first glance, the camera is comparable to the 12. Both have stock 12 megapixels at the back, both are similar aperture, both have similar front-facing cameras, all good. But dig a bit deeper and you'll see the reason why the camera module on the back is so much larger. The camera on the 14 Pro is a beast, physically and digitally. It can produce stunning 48 megapixel photos, which are large in pixels and large in file size. You may be asking why you'd want that, as around 85 megabyte size files, why would you want to do this? And for me, there's 3 main reasons. Firstly, I could be lazy with my composing of shots. Just make sure the thing you want is in somewhere in the frame and it will be in focus and not pixelated. Secondly, it gives you the opportunity to print digital photos out in a physical form. Due to the quality, these will be far graded out, printed out on any scale size. And finally, you can take less shots. Instead of just shooting many times in different positions, you could just take one shot encompassing everything and just crop in what you need. The only other issue, apart from the file size with the 48 megapixel photos, is the time taken between shots. It does take a couple of seconds to process the massive files every time you want to take a photo. Not only have the pixels been improved, but you also get a better zoom. Now, if you weren't sure, optical zoom is physically zooming in with the camera lens, whereas digital zoom is all the work done inside the software. So optical zoom is superior. The 12 has a 5 times digital zoom, whereas the 14 Pro smashes this with a 15 times digital zoom. So here's a comparison of the same shot zoomed in with both phones. The HD on the camera is far better with the 14 Pro, highlighting shadows with greater depth and clarity, and the colours are fantastic. Next up is night mode, and that has also been improved with their 2nd generation sensor. This means it can collect more light and produce less noise images in low light. It has the same process of night shooting, when you have to sit there and hold the phone still for a few seconds as it gathers light, but as you can see, the results are much better, picking out better colours and clarity. Another quality feature is the macro mode. I've used this far more than I ever thought I would, and it's a very good way of activating. To activate macro mode, you just move closer to the subject. The phone realises you are close to an object, and you see a slight flicker in the screen as it changes lenses, and then you get very close to an object and take the photo. This is a killer feature for me that is greatly missing on the 12. But not only is the 14 Pro far better at taking photos, it also was better at taking video. Another highlighted feature in the Apple keynote was Action Cam. Here's where you can see the 12 next to the 14 Pro and how they both handle movement, specifically here in what is admittedly an exaggerated walk. This is a game changer when it comes to videos, but with the caveat that Action Cam can actually only record at a crop of 2.8K. To make this 4K, I believe the sensor and the camera need to be able to handle 8K efficiently, but 2.8K is fine, and what you've seen has been upscaled for YouTube at 4K. The Action Cam also needs quite a lot of light to work, although you can add a low light Action Cam mode in the settings, but this won't work in darkness due to the amount of light needed in the sensor. Cinematic mode is also added in over the 12. This is a pseudo Hollywood camera effect of the bokeh added and switching focuses on near and far objects. You can lock the focus of something if you want to, and track it as you pan across. It is a superb feature that I didn't realise I needed when leaving my 12 behind. Remember I said earlier that I had the 256GB model? Well, because I have that, I have access to the ProRes feature. It's a higher video capture format that isn't available on the 128 models. This is most likely due to the file sizes, which it states is 6GB a minute Finally, another inclusion over the 12 is the front camera's ability to autofocus. This comes in handy for all you selfie fans. There are other small refinements to the camera, but what I've mentioned are the headline acts and things to consider when moving to the 14 Pro over the 12. And finally, number 6 is the screen itself. There's some good and there's some bad here. But compare the screens to the 12 and they are pretty much identical. The 12 is 2532 by 1170 at 460 ppi, whereas the Pro is slightly bigger at 2556 by 1179, again at 460 dpi, so nothing majorly noticeable there. Where the difference comes in is the brightness. The 12 is 625 nits and the 14 Pro is 1000 nits. And in layman's terms, nits is the measurement of how bright something is. So you can see the 14 Pro is quite a bit brighter as standard, but push this and it becomes even more of a gap. The 14 Pro can hit 2000 nits, whereas the 12 stays at 1200. These figures are for outside brightness and only really kicking when you're in an area of bright light. And as you can see, it makes a huge difference. I absolutely love how bright this goes, but the phone does get hot when being this bright, and therefore your battery does take a significant hit. But in reality, as long as you aren't in bright sunshine for several hours, you'll be fine. The 14 Pro also has ProMotion and 120Hz, which you may not notice at first glance, but it does make the screen smoother and more fluid. It's a quality of life upgrade from the 12, but it also helps with battery life, hence the stats we were talking about earlier with the video playback time being extended. Now, I've put this feature in with the screen, but it's probably more of a software camera feature, and that's to be able to unlock your phone in landscape mode. It's a small change, but a huge help. And finally, in the screen, there is the always on feature, which is a very handy addition over any previous model. So once locked, the phone dims, which slightly highlights all of the on-screen text, leaving it legible so you don't need to raise to wake your phone anymore. It leaves the time and any widgets that you've added. So there we are then. There are 6 reasons I'd upgrade, but I also have 2 reasons why you may not want to upgrade and wait for the iPhone 15. First up, it's pretty much the same phone. So holding the phone in your hand and using it, the only difference you'll see day to day using the dynamic island and the weight. Everything else is an add-on. It's the same size, it's the same apps, it's the same iOS, a lot is the same. This isn't a huge technological leap like the iPhone X or the iPhone 10 was. If you want the I have a completely new phone here feeling, then maybe look at the 14 Pro Max over the 12. Secondly, it's the price. Have a look at this graphic. The iPhone 14 Pro is no impulse buy. This is the sole reason that I wait every other generation, and that's on UK prices. Look at this graphic and you'll see that places around the world, it's almost impossible to justify buying an iPhone. If you're Turkish, you're looking at working 147 days just to pay for one, which is absolute insanity. So the decision is yours on whether you can afford one, or whether it's realistically possible for you to buy the phone. So there we have it then, 7 headline features on why it's a good idea to upgrade from the iPhone 12 to the iPhone 14 Pro. If you have a 13 Pro, then you may have a more difficult time to work out if it's worth it for you. So please do let me know if you're in a 12, will you be going for the cheaper 13, 13 Pro or the 14? What's your reason behind this? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks so much then, until the next video. Bye bye.